Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Beis, Daf 52 of Masechta Ksubis. Friends, Daf 52 we talk about like redeeming your wife. If your wife gets kidnapped, do you have to redeem her? Well, it depends who you are. It depends who your wife is, I guess. It depends on all sorts of things. Then we get into the Ksubas B'nin Dichrin. It's come up recently. We get to a Mishnah which describes the Ksubas B'nin Dichrin, and that will kind of take us to the end. Alright, we're going to start on Daf Nun Aleph Mud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. So the fellow, when he writes his Ksuba document, so he writes in there that, well, it depends. If he is a Yisrael, or let's say a non-Kohen, so he writes to his wife that if she were to get kidnapped, he would redeem her, and then they would resume being married. Now, if he's a Kohen, however, a Kohen, unfortunately, if his wife sleeps with another man, even if it is against her will, if she's raped, they can't remain together. That even if it's anusa, a Kohen cannot remain with his wife anymore. So now, in that case, the Kohen in the Ksuba document, of course, wouldn't write then that he'll redeem her and then they'll resume being married. There, he would say that in the event that she gets kidnapped, he would redeem her, and then she doesn't go home with him, and because we have to assume that maybe she slept with her captors and they can't remain together. So now, we're going to see now machlokas between Abaye and Rave. Omer Abaye. Says Abaye. Almane le kohen gadol. So what if an almane marries a kohen gadol? What if an almane marries a kohen gadol? Technically speaking, as long as you're not Rabbi Akiva, and as long as there's like different opinions about Rabbi Akiva, generally we assume that the almane le kohen gadol is a lav, and while it's not allowed and they can't remain together, technically the kiddushin counts. And if you wrote for a ksubah that says in it, like a regular kohen would say, that in the event that you get kidnapped, I will redeem you, but we can't be together, and I'll send you home to your father's house or whatever it is. So it says, I'll send you back l'mdinosech. I'll send you back to where you came from. So it says Abaye Omer Abaye Almana l'kohen gadol. So if you have a widow who's married to a kohen gadol, chayiv livdosa. If she gets kidnapped, he must redeem her. He must pay the ransom. Because after all, what does it say in the Ksuba document? It says, I will redeem you and send you back to where you came from, which is exactly what would happen by an almana and a kohen gadol. They can't be together, so he'll redeem her and send her back home. Mamzeris Nesina li Yisrael. Now, if it comes to a mamzeris or a Nesina who's married to a Yisrael, which is also not allowed. So now, a Yisrael, what does it say in his document? In his Ksuba, it'll say that, well, in the event of you being kidnapped, I will redeem you, and then we will resume being married. But if it's a mamzeris or a Nesina, they're not allowed to be married to each other. So then, says the Gemara, Eino chayiv liftosa, he does not need to redeem her, she'einani koreba v'osvinoch li'intu, because since a Yisrael is not allowed to be married to a mamzeris or Nesina, so what's written in the document is actually impossible, right? He can't redeem her and then resume being husband and wife. So therefore, he doesn't have to, if the stipulation is not actually going to be able to come to fruition, because they're not allowed to resume being married, so he doesn't have to redeem her. Rava disagrees with Abaye with regard to the kohen, the almana and the kohen gadol. Kol she'isur shivya korim la chayiv livdosa, isur davar acher gorim la enu chayiv livdosa. Says Rava, look. That's what he says. He says, look. Almana and the kohen gadol, there was a pre-existing condition. Forget about them. Forget about her being kidnapped. They were already not allowed to be together because she's a widow, he's a kohen gadol. A kohen gadol is not allowed to marry a widow, and therefore, since the issue is not a stipulation issue, it's a pre-existing issue that they, even prior to the kidnapping, they were not allowed to be together. So therefore, he does not need to he does not need to redeem her, right? It says, right, we say kol she'isur shivya gorim lo chayiv lifdosa. That, in a situation where the issue is, right, so for example, in this case, you have an almoneh who's married to a Kohen Gadol. Now, when it comes in general to, if you forget about a Kohen Gadol and almoneh, a regular Kohen, right, so if his wife gets kidnapped, so they can't remain married anymore, because unfortunately we have to assume that she slept with her captors, or that her captors slept with her against her will. So the issue is that she got kidnapped, and when she got kidnapped, she's not allowed to go back to her husband, and therefore we write into the Ksubah that I'll redeem you and you'll go back to where you came from. Now, when it comes to Kohen Gadol, the issue isn't that she was kidnapped, and that's what's causing them not to be allowed to be together. They weren't allowed to be together from already before then. So since the issue was already from beforehand, he doesn't need to redeem her, right? So again, so Rav Amar says, Rav kol she'isur shivya gorim lo chayiv livdosa. That if the issue only arose on account of her being kidnapped, so then the kohen would need to redeem her and then send her on her way. But isur davar acher gorim la. But if the issue is coming from elsewhere, i.e., the fact that it's almoneh the Kohen Gadol, which has nothing to do with kidnapping, there was already an issue here. Einu chayiv lifdosa. He does not have an obligation to redeem her, even though technically speaking, what's written in the document would be able to come to fruition. He would be able to redeem her and send her on her way. However, since there was already a pre-existing issue in their marriage, which is almoneh the Kohen Gadol, he does not have an obligation to redeem her. Let's say that it's taka machlokes tanoim. Excuse me. I gotta not quite yawn, but not quite not yawn. I go somewhere in between. Hopefully they're not doing any helicopter rides today. Okay. So let's say that the machlokas between Abaye and Rav is like the machlokas between Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer. We're about to see machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. And let's try to say that Abaye is like Rabbi Eliezer, Rav is like Rabbi Yoshua. Let's see, friends. Let's say it's like a machlokas tanoim. Hamadir es ishto v'nishbeis. Bam, param, param. So we're assuming for now that this is talking about a kohen. Okay, a kohen is married. Now this kohen, he makes a neder. You know what his neder is? I'm not going to benefit one iota from my wife. Friends, you hear this? A husband says he's not going to benefit one iota. I don't know if iota makes sense in this context, whatever. From his wife. Friends, that is a marriage that's going to end very quickly. They are on a crash course. Is that what it's called? A crash course for divorce. And then she gets kidnapped. So look, there was a pre-existing condition here, right? Before she got kidnapped, he already made a neder that he's not going to get any benefit from her. They were already going to obviously have to get divorced. But then she gets kidnapped. And he's a kohen, right? Which means that what's written in the document is that if you get kidnapped, I will redeem you and send you on your way. Which, that's still the same thing, right? That applies, right? Meaning he already said that he wasn't getting any benefit from her. They were going to have to end up getting divorced. She wouldn't be able to come back to him anyways. And in the document it says that if you get kidnapped, I'll redeem you and send you on your way. So technically speaking, he should redeem her and send her on her way. But let's see. So, let's say it's like a machlokas tanoim. Hamadir esishto. If you have a fellow who says that he's not going to get any benefit from his wife, which means they're going to have to get divorced, v'nishbeis. But then she gets kidnapped. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, poda v'nosin lo ksubasa. Rabbi Eliezer says he nonetheless needs to pay the ransom, and then he nonetheless needs to pay the ransom, and then they get divorced. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Rabbi Yeshua says nosin lo ksubasa v'nu poda. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says, no, he doesn't need to redeem her. Right? They get divorced, he pays her a ksuba, he doesn't need to redeem her. Reb Nosson says, Reb Nosson, Sha'alti as sumchis, so Reb Nosson says, Yitaka as sumchis. Kisha'am Rabbi Yeshua nosin la ksubasot, that when Rabbi Yeshua says that he doesn't need to pay her ransom, that he can just divorce her, ve'eno poda, he doesn't pay the ransom, k'she'dir levasov nishbeis, is it talking about when prior to the kidnapping, he had already said that he's not going to get any benefit from her, and then she got kidnapped? Or is it talking about when she got kidnapped, and then he says, you know what, I'm not going to get any benefit from her, and therefore we're going to get divorced? Ve'amarli, and Sumchis said to Reb Nosson, Shamaiti, lo Shamaiti, says, look, I don't know I didn't hear about what Rabbi Yeshua said there, but Venirin Devarim, but it would make sense to say, Shedir Levasov Nishbeis, that he had made this neder prior to her getting kidnapped. The Amart Nishbeis Levasov Idira, because if you say that she got kidnapped, and then only afterwards he made this neder, also the Iarume, he's going, it's going to lead to trickery, right? Meaning, if his wife gets kidnapped, and then there's a loophole where he could just say that I'm making a neder that I'm not going to get any benefit from her, which means that Mimela we're going to have to get divorced, and now that we're getting divorced, I don't have to pay her ransom. So it doesn't work like that, because people would be tricky and just make that neder when their wife gets kidnapped. My love. So now the Gemara explains how the machlokas between Abaye and Rava aligns with the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. So let's say, b'mader eshes koyin kamiflige. As I said a few minutes ago, let's say that we're talking about where the fellow who makes the neder that he's not going to get any benefit from his wife, he is a koyin. So therefore, anyways, written in the ksuba was that if she gets kidnapped, he will pay her ransom and send her on her way. The Abaye damak Rabbi Eliezer, and Abaye says like Rabbi Eliezer that look, he should pay the ransom and then send her on her way, just like it says in the Ksubis. The Rav damak Rabbi Yoshua, and Rav would say like Rabbi Yoshua that, and he'll explain that look, Rabbi Yoshua is saying that he doesn't have to redeem her, and that's because and we're going to explain that's because it was a precondition, a pre-existing condition. That already before she got kidnapped, he had already said that he's not going to get any benefit from her, and therefore, even prior to her getting kidnapped, they weren't able to remain together, since, he said he wasn't going to get any benefit from her, and therefore he does not have to pay the ransom. Lo, we say no, do not explain it like that. Do not explain that Abaye aligns with Rabbi Eliezer and Rave aligns with Rabbi Yoshua, and that it's talking about where you have a koyin and he says he's not going to get any ano. Hacha b'maya skinon. Actually, it's talking about where she did the vowing. She made a vow that she was not going to get any benefit from her husband, from him, and vikiyim lahu, and he didn't annul it. That if a fellow's wife makes a neder, I believe he has 24 hours to annul it, and he just let it come to be. Right? He just didn't do he didn't annul it, and Memele, by not annulling it, after a day, it now becomes a proper vow. Rabbi Eliezer savar hu nosan etzba bein shineho. Rabbi Eliezer says it's his fault, and because it's his fault, he has to pay the ransom. Rabbi Yeshua savar he nosna etzba bein shineho. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua puts the blame on her and says that she shouldn't have made the vow in the first place. So, Rabbi Eliezer puts the blame on him that he allowed it to come to be by not annulling it, and therefore it's his fault and he has to pay the ransom. Rabbi Yeshua says it's her fault because she made the neder in the first place, and therefore he does not have to pay the ransom. So it has nothing to do with pre-existing conditions. It has to do with who's to blame, right? So we're saying that she's the one who made the neder, and the question is, who is to blame? But then the Gemara says, I don't understand. If she is to blame, then why does Rabbi Yeshua say that he gives her a ksuba? If she's the one to blame, then he shouldn't have to pay her. Visu, and more so, Reb Nosson says, Reb Nosson Shalti is Sumchis, right? Reb Nosson had said that he asked Sumchis, Rabbi Yeshua Nosin la Ksubasa, that when Rabbi Yeshua says that he has to pay the Ksuba Veinopoda, but does not have to pay the ransom. Kisheidir Levosov Nishbeis, was it talking about where the Neder preceded the kidnapping? Oh, Bishanishbeis Levosov Idira, or is it talking about where she was first kidnapped and only afterwards did she make was there this vow? Ve'omer, and Sumcha says, Lo Shamati, I didn't hear anything. Ve'idin Nadra he says, right? That so Sumcha says, I didn't hear anything. But if we would say that the vow came only after the kidnapping, then it would lead to trickery. So now, Ve'idin Nadra but if she's the one who made the vow, Mali Hidira Levasof Nishbes, Mali Nishbes Levasof Hidira, then who cares if she first got kidnapped and then made the neder, or first made the neder and then got kidnapped, right? The whole issue with it depends if the vow came before the kidnapping or afterwards was from his perspective. That if we allow him to make the vow and then not have to redeem her after she's already gotten kidnapped, it might lead to a tricky situation where he doesn't want to pay the ransom. He doesn't want to redeem her, so he makes a vow that he's not going to get any benefit from her, and then immediately they have to get divorced, and he divorces her, and he doesn't pay the ransom, and therefore it can lead to trickery, and therefore it makes sense to say that he would have to, that Rabbi Yeshua would hold that he would have had to made the neder before the kidnapping, and only then would Rabbi Yeshua say that he doesn't have to ransom her, because already from beforehand, they were headed to divorce. So, but if we're saying that she's the one making the neder, then who cares if it happened beforehand or afterwards, right? He's not doing anything tricky. So olam da'adra ihu. So no. So rather, it is that he is the one making the neder. Okay. So he is the one making the neder. He is the one making the neder, and he says he's not going to get any benefit from his wife. Now, Abaye Matar, it's the time. Rav Matar, it's the time. Both Abaye and Rava are going to explain how both Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer are in line with their opinions, and that both Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer would agree that when it comes to a almana and a kohen gadol, that the Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua would agree with their opinion, right? That Abaye says that he would have to redeem her, and Rava says that he would not. Abaye matar it's the timing. Abaye explains according to his reasoning that when it comes to Amana l'kohen gadol, kuli alma lo plige dechay lifdosa. Both Rabbi Eliezer. Oh, you have some screaming coming from outside. Maybe people have drank enough alcohol to get them screaming, or maybe someone's just getting excited. Maybe he's upset that there's no helicopter rides today. I don't know. I don't know why he's screaming. Probably because he knows that I'm recording Babylon Talmud, so he wants to bother me. So, says Abaye that, look, both Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer would agree, the Chayiv Lifdosa, that by Amon l'Kohen Gadol, he has to redeem her. He redeems her and sends her on her way. Mamzeres Nesina Yisrael Kuli Amalo Plige De'enu Chayiv Lifdosa. And if it's a Mamzeres or a Nesina married to a Yisrael, so then he would not have to redeem her, because it says in the Ksuba that he'll redeem her and then remain married with her, but he can't remain married with her. Madir Eshes Kohen Nami. And also, if you have a Kohen who makes this neder, and he says he's not going to get any benefit from his wife, and then she gets kidnapped, so there also he would have to redeem her, because he'll redeem her and send her on her way. It's the same thing as Amana L'Kohen Gadol. There's a pre-existing condition, right? Whether the pre-existing condition is that an Alman is not allowed to marry Kohen Gadol, or if it's that he made a neder that he's not going to get any benefit from her. Either way, there was some pre-existing issue why they can't be together, and yet Abaye would say that both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua would say that he'll redeem her and send her on her way, just like it says in the Ksubis. Ki plige b'mader eshes Yisrael. So Abaye is going to explain that the machloka is between, right? So he already said that everybody's going to agree with him with regard to Amon and the Kohen Gadol, that he has to redeem her and send her on her way. Where Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua disagree is with regard to actually when you have a Yisrael makes a neder that he's not going to get any benefit from his wife. He's not going to get any benefit from his wife. Now, the thing is, in the Ksubis, what does he write to her? He writes in the Ksubis that if you get kidnapped, I'll redeem you and we'll resume being married. Now, in this case, they can't resume being married because he made a vow that he's not going to get any benefit from her. Therefore, they cannot resume being married. So, Rabbi Eliezer also baser meikara, Rabbi Yeshua also baser basof. However, Abaye explains the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua is that enochinami. At this point, he would not be able to redeem her and then go back to being married to her because he made a neder that he wasn't going to get any benefit from her. But initially, at the time that he wrote the Ksubis, and at the time that he wrote that if you get kidnapped, I'll redeem you and we'll resume being married, he was able to redeem her, and he would have been able to redeem her and then continue being married. And therefore Rabbi Eliezer goes based on initially at the time that the Ksubis was written, at the time that they got married, if she would have gotten kidnapped then, he would have been able to redeem her and they would have resumed being married. And therefore Rabbi Eliezer goes based on the initial status, whereas Rabbi Yeshua goes based on the current status, which is, well, currently he made a neder that he wasn't going to get any benefit from her, and therefore after redeeming her, they wouldn't be able to continue being married. So therefore Rabbi Yeshua says, look, you can't be Mekayim what it says in the Ksubis, which is I'll redeem you and then we'll continue being married, so therefore he doesn't have to redeem her. Rav Mitaritz the Taime, and Rav explains according to his reasoning that Amon and the Kohen Gadol, when it comes to Amon and marrying the Kohen Gadol, where there's a pre-existing condition prior to the kidnapping, i.e. that an Amon is not allowed to be married to a Kohen Gadol. Mamzeres and Nesina Yisrael, as well as a Mamzeres and a Nesina married to a Yisrael, because in that case, you wouldn't be able to be Mekayim what it says in the Shtar, which is that I'll redeem you and then we'll go back to being married, but Mamzeres and Nesina cannot be married to Yisrael. So Kuliyama lo plige de enu chayiv liftoso, so of course he doesn't have to redeem her. Ki plige b'madir, where the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua is by you have a fellow who makes a neder that he's not going to get any benefit from his wife, bein eshes kohen, whether it is the wife of a kohen, that there's a pre-existing condition then that they're not allowed to, that they can't continue being married since he said he's not going to get any benefit from her. Uvein eshes Yisrael, or whether it is an eshes Yisrael, that Rabbi Eliezer also baser mei ikare, that Rabbi Eliezer says that you go based on initially. So Rabbi Eliezer says that, well, when the Kohen married this woman, so what did it say in the Ksubis? It says that if you get kidnapped, I will ransom you and send you home. So at the time that they got married, if she would have gotten kidnapped, he would have redeemed her and sent her on her way. And also a Yisrael, the time that he got married, so he would have been able to redeem her and then continue being married. But currently, if you go based on now, well, now he had said already that that they're not allowed to that he's not going to get any benefit from her. And since he's not going to get any benefit from her, so by Yisrael, he wouldn't be able to be Mekayim, I'll redeem you and we'll continue being married. And by a Kohen, well, there was he already had made the neder prior to her getting kidnapped, and therefore there's a pre-existing condition, and therefore, says Rave, that he wouldn't have to redeem her, right? So if you go based on initially at the time that they got married, so then both by the Kohen, he would have been able to Mekayim, I'll ransom you and send you on your way, and by the Yisrael, he would have been able to do like it said, I'll ransom you and we'll continue being married. So if you go based on initially, like Rabbi Eliezer is saying, so then he would redeem her. But if you go like Rabbi Yoshua is saying, based on where things stand now, well, right now he had said that he's not going to get any benefit from her, and therefore if he is a Yisrael, so he can't be Mekayim that, he'll redeem her and then they'll be able to continue being married. And if he's a Kohen, so then, there was already this neder that he's not going to get any benefit from her, and therefore there's a pre-existing condition as to why they wouldn't be able to stay together. Alright, very good. So there you go. There's a machlokas between Abaye and Rav. And both of them sort of argue that Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer would both hold like their respective opinions. Very interesting stuff. So now the Mishnah had said, Nishbeis chayv lefilosa v'chulei, that if she is kidnapped, he has to redeem her. Tan Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Nishbeis b'chayv baila, if she gets kidnapped when her husband is still alive, v'achar kach meis, and then afterwards her husband, v'achar kach meis baila. Oh, so now the police people are driving their cars, and their cars have these things where you can, I don't know, how does it work? You push a button and it makes, everybody hears a sound. So they keep on pushing, they keep on making these sounds, and it's distracting. So Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Nishbeis b'chaye baila, if she gets kidnapped when her husband's still alive, b'chakach meis baila, and then afterwards her husband dies. Hikirba baila, if at the time that the husband died, he was aware that his wife was kidnapped, yorshin chayv niftosa, so then the children who inherit him, or whoever inherits him, need to redeem her. Lo hikirba baila, if the husband was unaware at the time of his death that his wife was kidnapped, ein yorshin chayv niftosa, the inheritors do not need to redeem her. Levi thought to paskin like this brisa, that it depends if the husband was aware of it at the time of his death. Omrle Rab, says Rab to Levi, Hachi Amr Chabibi, this is what my uncle Reb Chia said, that the halacha is not like this brisa, rather it's like the following brisa, Nishbez la'achar misas baila, that if she's taken captive, if she's kidnapped after her husband dies, the orphans do not need to redeem her. Not only that, but even if she's kidnapped when her husband is alive, and then afterwards he died, afterwards her husband dies, the orphans do not need to redeem her, and that's regardless of if she's aware or not, because because it says in the document, I will redeem you, and then we will resume being married, and of course they're not going to resume being married because he's dead. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Nishbeis, so if she was kidnapped and the nudniks wanted 10 times her value, so if she gets kidnapped one time, so you could pay up to 10 times her value, but not a second time. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, ein poden es hashvuin yosher al kedei demeim. We do not pay a ransom that is worth more of the value of the individual, mipnei tikkun ha'olam, in order to set an example, right? It reminds me of the concept of we don't negotiate with terrorists, right? Because if I understand correctly, the motivation for that stance is that, well, if you send a message to the terrorists that what they're doing, right, that by giving into their demands, or let's say by giving into their demands, they win. They get what they wanted. And we want to make it clear that it's unacceptable to do that. And therefore, here also, Reb Shimon Gamliel says that we don't pay more than the value of the person, because if you do it once, they'll do it again. They'll realize it's profitable. Steal somebody, kidnap them, charge 10 times the price. The desperate people pay the ransom. It's very profitable. And then the next person gets kidnapped the next day. So therefore, says Reb Shimon Gamliel, we have to take a stance, which is that we don't pay more than the value of the person. Okay. Right? To make sure, because if you do pay more, then it's going to happen again. And therefore, in order to prevent it from happening again, don't pay more than the value of the fellow or the fella. But for the Gemara, 1 second. So that implies that according to Reb Shimon Gamliel, you would pay up to the value of the individual, even if that value is more than her ksuba, right? If the value of her is more than the value of her ksube. But we have a contradiction that says punkt fakert. Nishbeis that if she was kidnapped and they were demanding up to 10 times her value, so one time you could redeem her at that value, at that amount. But after that, either he doesn't. Oh, I think maybe I translated that wrong the first time. But after that, he doesn't need to redeem her. If he wants to, he can. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer says, Reb Shimon Gamliel im hoyer perkona kneged ksubasa pode im lavenu pode, that if her if the ransom that the nudniks are demanding is up to the value of her marriage contract of her ksube, so then he could ransom her. But im lavenu pode, but if it's more than the value of her ksube, then he doesn't pay the ransom. So we see in the two different prices, two different amounts. One is up to her value, the other is up to the value of her ksube. So Reb Shimon Gamliel actually says that whichever one is less money. Right? So if her value is more than the ksubas, then the ceiling is the price of the ksuba. If the price of the ksuba is worth more than her value, then the ceiling is her value. Okay. If his wife gets sick, then he needs to pay for the medical bills. Excuse me, I'm going to yawn. So if there are medical bills to be paid, so the fellow pays for medical bills. So of course, I think as we've seen, I can't remember what's on what page, but a widow is sustained. Yeah, of course we've seen this. I believe we've seen this. Have we seen this, friends? Have we seen this? I think we've seen it. I don't know. We've seen it by the daughter, I think. That the widow gets support, gets sustained by the property of the orphans. And medical bills are treated like mizonis. Look, if it is a medical expense that has a fixed amount, so then it is not like mizonis, right? Food doesn't have a fixed amount, right? You eat every day, there's no fixed amount. It depends on how long you live. You eat more, you eat less. There's no fixed amount. So therefore, right? So if we're talking about medical bills that don't have a cap to them, that they're chronic, that they're ongoing, so then those are like mizonis, and those would be covered by the inheritance of the father from the property, from the nichse yisomin. But if it's something that has a fixed amount, so then the orphans would not pay for that. It's not like mizonis. She would pay for it from the value of her ksuba that she received. Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Also, Akozas Dam Eretz Yisrael Kerefusha, in the kitzbah that they made, bloodletting in Eretz Yisrael, they treated that as a medical expense that has no fixed amount. Kreve de Rabbi Yochanan Havale Itas Abba, one of Rabbi Yochanan's relatives had a father's widow. I guess his father died, and then there was a widow. Davas Tzricha Refuah Kol Yoma, and she needed daily, medical attention, which was essentially considered like mizonos, and the orphans were paying for it. Also, the Kam de Rabbi Yochanan, they came before Rabbi Yochanan. Amrlu, and Rabbi Yochanan said to them, Izilu kotzu le'midi l'rofe. Why don't you go to the doctor and see if you could put together some kind of a fixed amount for this treatment, so that you don't have to pay for it anymore, and she'll pay for it. Then Rabbi Yochanan kind of felt bad that he told his relative about this trick, and he says that I've basically become like a lawyer. I've become, a lawyer, right? A lawyer represents one side. If you, over here, you kind of had two sides of the situation over here. You have the cousins, and you have the widow. The cousin, of course, wants the widow to pay for it. The widow wants the cousins to pay for it. So now he kind of took sides by saying to the cousin, well, why don't you, right? He basically became like a lawyer representing the cousin, and he suggested, well, why don't you go to the doctor and see if you could, decide on a fixed price. And if you could decide on a fixed price, well, then she'll pay for it and you won't have to pay for it. And he felt bad that he took sides. What was his initial rationale, and how come he had a change of heart and felt bad about it? Well, initially he figured, from your flesh do not hide, i.e., his cousin was coming to him for advice, saying he's in a difficult situation, that he's got these medical expenses that are piling up. So he wanted to help out his cousin. But in the end he says, look, an important person is different. He sets an example. People learn from him. And he didn't necessarily feel comfortable with the precedent that he was setting, which is there was a widow who had medical expenses, and he was basically, I guess, saying, you're on your own. So he felt that wasn't, even though, yes, he wanted to help out his cousin, he felt that maybe he was setting a negative precedent. Friends, now we move on to this Ksubas b'din dichrin. Who could tell me what Ksubas b'din dichrin is? I gave it a stab the other day. I don't think I quite got it right. So basically, Ksubas b'din dichrin is, here's the deal. As the Gemara is going to say in a few minutes, the idea of the Ksubas b'din dichrin is that you have the father, and the father is going to write a dowry for his daughter, right? Now the thing is, the father knows that, according to, strict Jewish law, we don't do this, of course, nowadays, but according to Jewish law, a fellow can have more than one wife. So therefore, the father-in-law, right, who's marrying off his daughter to this fellow, on the one hand, he's conflicted. On the one hand, he might want to write a nice gesunte dowry for his daughter. But what if this son-in-law goes and marries a second wife? And that second wife brings the opposite of a gesunte dowry, a very meager dowry. And then what will happen is, let's say each of these kids, right, each of these wives has one kid, let's say, keep it easy, right? So, so let's say the wife with the gesunte dowry is Sarah, the wife with the meager dowry is Rivka. Let's say they'll each have one kid. So what ends up happening is that if both Sarah and Rivka die, so then the husband inherits the Ksubis, right? And Sarah and Rivka are out of the picture, they're dead. The husband is going to inherit the Ksubah. And then when the husband dies, his property is shared equally among these two kids. And the father-in-law, at the time that he's, is saying, this is what I'm going to set as the dowry, is concerned that in this event that the kids die, and then the husband inherits the Ksubah, and then the husband dies, all of it is kind of pooled together as the husband's property, and it's divided equally among the two kids. And the father-in-law says, this isn't fair. I'm, contributing a big, starke, gesunte dowry, and this kid of my daughter's, right, the son of my daughter's co-wife, is going to end up getting 50% of it. So therefore, in order to, assure the father-in-law, don't worry, and to sort of, motivate him or encourage him, or I don't know what the word is, but have him feel good about providing a gesunte dowry, we say, look, we write into the ksuba that, in this case, right, if the Sarah and Rivka both die and the husband inherits both ksubas and then the husband dies, don't worry, your gesunte dowry is going to go to your grandson, and Sarah's meager dowry is going to go to her son. So that's one kind of example, right? That's one scenario where the Ksubas B'Nindichrin is significant, right? I.e., where one daughter has a big dowry and the other daughter has a small dowry. Another place where it's significant is, let's say that both wives have the same dowry. Sarah and Rivka, both of them have the same dowry, but Sarah has 2 kids and Rivka has 1 kid. So the father-in-law here also, he says, look, it's not fair that, if Sarah and Rivka both die and the husband inherits both ksubas and then the husband dies, it's not fair that all 3 kids divide up it equal, when really, my daughter only had 1 kid and that kid should inherit my entire dowry that I'm providing. Why should all of, my dowry, so let's say this, right? Let's say each daughter, Sarah and Rivka, brought into the marriage a dowry that was worth $1,500, right? And then both Sarah and Rivka die. The husband inherits all of it, the $3,000 of both dowries combined, and now he dies. And the father-in-law says that it's not fair that both dowries should be pooled together and divided 3 ways and each one gets 1,000. I want that my grandson, that my daughter only has 1 son, that son should get 1,500, not 1,000. It's not fair that it's all pooled together. So we say, don't worry. Your grandchildren are going to inherit your dowry. So basically, the Ksubas B'Nindichrin is a way of assuaging the father-in-law and encouraging the father-in-law to provide a good, starke, gesunte dowry without having any concerns that it's going to end up being divided among a bunch of kids who aren't even his grandson. So it says in the Mishnah, Lo kosav lo b'nindichrin, if he did not write into the ksuba, which is a standard process to write the following, but if he didn't write the following, b'nindichrin dihavu lichi minoi, that your male children that we have together, Inun yarsun kesef ksubasech, don't worry, they will inherit your dowry. Yoser al chulkehon de'imachuin, above, right, in addition to whatever else they inherit with their brothers, right? So the father's property, let's say, owned a bunch of houses and bank accounts, whatever it is. So all of that is divided equally among all the sons. But in addition to that, your sons will inherit your ksuba. Nobody else's sons will touch the value of your ksuba. Chayev, so even though he did not write this in the document, he is still obligated to it, Shutanai Bezdin, because it is a stipulation of the court, which regardless of if he actually writes it into the document, must be upheld. Next, B'non nukvan dihavan lichi minoi, that any daughters that we have together, Yehavyon Yazvin Bebesi, they will remain in my house, Umidzna Minichosai, that even after my death, my property, that which I inherit to my children, will pay for their mizonis, for their sustenance, Adatilakul Neguvin, until they get married. So even though he didn't write that, oh no, so this is, I guess, even if, if she dies, maybe, so then, meaning he's basically saying, don't worry, or maybe even if she's not dead, I don't know. Basically he's saying that so I don't think this is actually necessarily after his death. No, I'm sorry, now I'm getting all confused. Well, not confused. We had a Gemara the other day, right, which said that basically, we say that just like the B'Nindichrin is after his dead, so then, right, exactly, right. Right, that's what we said the other day. That just like the Ksubas B'Nindichrin is only after he's dead, so also the Mizonis is only after he dies, but during his lifetime he doesn't necessarily have to pay her mizonis, I think we said. But anyways, okay, so I think that the point is that after he's dead, don't worry, any daughters that they have together will be provided for by his estate. Chayev, even though he didn't write that into the document, that still must be provided, Shu Tanai Bezdin, because it is a stipulation of the court. Ate yazva bebeisi umidzina minachosai ko yimei meger almanu sayich bebeisi. And finally, if I die, so you will be able to remain in my house and also be sustained from my property as long as you are a widow. Right? If you get remarried, it's a different story. But as long as you are a widow, you can be sustained and supported from my property. Chayiv, even if he doesn't write that in the Ksubah, he's obligated to that. Shu Tanai Bezdin, because it's a stipulation of the court. Kacha Anshe Yerushalayim Kozvin. That is what the people in Jerusalem would write in their marriage documents. Anshe Galila Yu Kozvin Kanshe Yerushalayim. The people in the Galilee would do like the people in Jerusalem. Anshe Yehuda Yu Kozvin. But the people in Judah would write Ache Yirtzu Ayorshin Litein Loch Ksubasech, until the orphans want to pay you your Ksubah document. The fichach, therefore, ad imratzu yarshin narsinin la ksubaso fochinosa. Therefore, if the orphans want, they can just immediately just pay her ksuba, and then she's on her own. She's not going to be sustained by the estate anymore. Says the Gemara, Amr Rabbi Yechanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Says Rabbi Yechanan in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. V'pnei iskinu ksubas b'nin dichrin. So how come they made this concept of the ksubas b'nin dichrin? Kidei sheyikpots av v'yichtov levito kivno, so that a father-in-law will be incentivized. Oh, maybe that's what I was looking for. Incentivized. Yeah. Incentivized? Weiß nicht. That way the father will be sort of enticed, write a gesunte dowry for his daughter, as if it was his son, meaning he can rest assured that it's going to go to his daughter and to his grandchildren, and he'll write a gesunte dowry. Umiika midi drachman omer broliros bartelos siros. But I don't understand. Generally speaking, the property, right? According to, we want to argue that midoraise, the property of a father goes to the sons, and now and now the rabbis are coming and saying and encouraging the father to give his property to his daughter via a dowry. Shouldn't he preserve his property, and then when he dies it goes on to his sons? Why are we encouraging him to give away his property to his daughter as part of her dowry? Hanami d'oraisu. No, after all, this is also mid'oraisu. D'chsev, as the pasuk says, "Chunoshim v'olidu banim uvanis." Take wives and have sons and daughters. U'chulivnechem noshim, and take for your sons daughters. Vezbenoseichem tenula noshim, and give your daughters to men. Bishlama banim biyadei kaime. So I understand how he can, be mishadech his sons with girls, because the way generally is that the boys go after the girls. So he could sort of help out his sons find girls. Ela bante mikaimen biyade. But normally, if he has, the assumption is that if he has daughters, some guy would come with the help of his father to offer to marry her. And so therefore, how is her father helping out in that situation? It teaches us that, well, we can give her clothing and property, midi, and give her stuff, so that it will sort of make a sweeter, increase the chances, help her along with having a fellow marry her, I guess. The way that you help her get married is if you have a good geschmacka dowry, it makes it increases the likelihood of a fellow being interested. Weiter. Fine. V'asunas bilan to marry her. Bad kama. How much money should a fellow provide for a dowry? Abayi b'rava dami tavayu ad le'isu nichse, until a tenth of his property. Is it possible? I don't know much about dowries, Lamaisa. Is it possible that people in certain communities give even more than 100% of their net worth in dowries and go into big debts and stuff, buying like apartments and things? That's like a thing, right? Ve'ema the av liros the baal lo liros. So now, how about this? If the whole thing about the Ksubas B'nin Dichrin is, sort of to incentivize, I don't know if that's the right word, the father-in-law to write a big starke dowry, and we say, don't worry, all of your dowry is going to go to your grandchildren. Well, the dowry part of the Ksubah should be inherited by the grandchildren, but the Manu Masayim, which is part of the Ksubah regardless of the size of the dowry, that comes from the husband. So that should be divided up equally among all the children. So back to our example of if there are 3 kids, so we want to tell the father-in-law, don't worry, your big geschmacke dowry is going to go just to your grandson. But what about the Mana Masayim, which is regardless of his dowry, the husband needs to provide Mana Masayim. So let's say both are basulas, we're talking about 400 zuz, so that 400 zuz should be divided equally among the 3 kids, not that one should get 200 and then the other 2 should divide up 200 amongst themselves. So im kain avnaim mimna v'lo kasav. Meh, not really, because if he's being stingy, meaning what the whole point is that we want the father to rest assured, right? The father-in-law to rest assured, don't worry, your daughter's ksuba is going to your grandson. And if you start saying, well, actually just technically your part of the ksuba goes to your grandson, but the part that's contributed by the husband is actually going to be divided equally among everybody else, he's going to be like, all right, this is getting complicated, forget it. So we just want to keep things simple and clear that, look, we want to incentivize you to give a gezunta dowry, so therefore the entire ksuba of your daughter will go to your grandson. Now maybe let's say if the whole point of the Ksubas B'nin Dichrin is to incentivize the father, well, let's just say that the Ksubas B'nin Dichrin only applies when the incentive worked. If the father actually provided a dowry, so then we make sure that the ksuba of his daughter goes to the grandchildren. But what if the father didn't provide a dowry? If the father didn't provide a dowry, so then obviously the incentive didn't work. So then why should his daughter's ksuba go to his grandchildren? The whole point of the daughter's ksuba going to the grandchildren is to make sure that that her document goes to her kids in order to incentivize him to provide a ksuba. But if that didn't work, so then maybe that document should be divided equally among all the kids. So lo plug rabbanan. The rabbis made what's called the lo plug. The rabbi said, we don't make any distinctions. Every ksuba has the stipulation about b'nin dichrin, regardless of if there's a dowry or not. Bas ben abonim nami tiros. Now, let me ask you a kasha. What if Sarah has, 5 boys, Rivka has 1 girl? So I would still think that the father-in-law would want that Rivka's girl should get the dowry that he's providing, right? Let Sarah's 5 sons divide up her ksuba, and let Rivka's daughter get her ksuba. But we don't say that. It's b'nin dichrin. In that case, all of the 5 sons would inherit the ksubis, right? Basically, Sarah and Rivka's, the husband would inherit, right? If Sarah and Rivka died, the husband would inherit their ksubis, and then it would be divided up equally among the sons. But why shouldn't the daughter, if there's only 1 daughter, shouldn't she get her mother's ksuba? Kanachla shavia rabbanon. We treat it like inheritance. Inheritance goes to the boys. Pas ben abonis tiros. Okay, but what if there are only girls, right? Let's say Sarah has 2 girls and Rivka has 1 girl. So shouldn't the same concept apply that Sarah's 2 girls should get her ksuba and Rivka's girl should get her ksuba? But we don't say that. It's ksuba's b'nin dichrin. Lo plug rabbanon, again, we don't make distinctions. It applies to when there are boys, doesn't apply when there are girls. V'tik baby metaltalei. So if we're treating it like inheritance, so then inheritance is inherited even by movable objects, right? But we had said the other day that the Ksubas b'nedichron is only by property. Because we treat it like a ksuba, which is only collected from property. Tichof mi meshaibde. Well, if it's like a ksuba, then we should be able to collect it from nechasim mishubadim. Yarsun tanan. It says to inherit. Inheritance doesn't come from nechasim mishubadim. Be'ema afagav deleka moser dinar. Oh, and let's say that this is even when there isn't anything extra than a dinar, right? Meaning that in order for us to have the ksubas b'nedichron, there has to be at least more of an inheritance from the father than just the ksubas, right? Because mida oraisa, the inheritance of the father, is divided up equally among all the kids. This is a chiddush that the Rabbanon are saying that in order to incentivize the father-in-law to write a healthy, a good, big gesunte dowry, we want to incentivize him by saying, even though mida oraisa, all the kids divide up equally, your grandkids will get your ksuba. Now, in order for the rabbis to be able to do that, there has to at least be some part of the husband's inheritance that is going to be divided equally among the kids. So at least that could be satisfied midoraisa. So what does the Gemara say? So ve'ema afagav deleka moser dinar. So basically the way that works is, we could say that Sarah's kids get her ksuba and Rivka's kids get her ksuba, as long as there's one extra dinar that when the father died, in addition to the values of the ksubas, there was still an extra dinar that could be divided equally among the sons. So then we can do ksubas b'nedichron. So the question is, why do we need that extra dinar? So, and for the Gemara, because if there's no extra dinar, well, then there isn't going to be any inheritance that's being divided up equally among the kids, which is how inheritance works midoraisa. So if he dies and he only leaves the values of the ksubas, so then we would have to divide that up equally, because that's really how inheritance works midoraisa. But as long as there's a little bit, even just one dinar more than the values of the ksubas, and that can be divided equally among all the kids, well then then we can give to each set of kids the ksuba of their mother. Friends, that was daf nun beis of Masechta Ksubis. That was a big daf, and we started off with the machlokas between Abaye and Rave with regard to Amon and the Kohen Gadol. When there was does an Amon and a Kohen Gadol need to ransom his wife? Abaye says yes. Rave says no. And then we continued on some halachas of ransom, and we said that medical bills are considered like mizonos. We also saw machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Reb Shimon Gamliel about how much do you is there a cap on how much we pay for a ransom? Chacham say up to 10 times their value, and Reb Shimon Gamliel says either up to her value or up to the value of the ksuba, but more than that, we don't want to be sending a message to these nudniks that what they're doing is working and that it's profitable for them. We then got to a Mishnah which discussed different stipulations of the ksuba that are mandatory for the husband to provide, regardless of if he actually writes them, such as the ksubas b'nedichron, such as providing sustenance for the daughters, and such as providing sustenance for his widow. And then we discussed the ksubas b'nedichron, what the goal of it, why we have it, to incentivize the husband, the father-in-law, to provide a gezunta dowry. Friends, that was daf nun beis of Masechta Ksubis. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.